today that it had escalated bombardments in Gaza overnight, and Palestinian officials said that hundreds of people had been killed, adding to the devastating toll as Israel faces pressure to delay a ground invasion. Israel said it had struck more than 400 targets in the past 24 hours after hitting more than 320 targets a day earlier. A United Nations Security Council meeting on the Israel-Gaza war began today with the Secretary General of the United Nations saying in an address that it was important to recognize that the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum and that Palestinians had been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. The grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas, the Secretary General said, and he also said, and those appalling attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. The Biden administration is concerned that Israel lacks achievable military objectives in Gaza and that the Israel Defense Forces are not yet ready to launch a ground invasion with a plan that can work. In phone conversations with Israeli counterparts, his Israeli counterpart, the U.S. Defense Secretary stressed the need for careful consideration of how Israeli forces might conduct a ground invasion of Gaza, where Hamas maintains intricate tunnel networks under densely populated areas. And Representative Tom Emmer of Minnesota, the number 3 House Republican, dropped his bid for Speaker today only hours, I think it was 4 hours, after securing his divided party's nomination. This happened after a swift backlash from the right, including former President Donald Trump. This left Emmer's candidacy, quite frankly, in shambles. Emmer's abrupt exit signaled that Republicans were as far as ever from breaking a deadlock that has left Congress leaderless and paralyzed for 3 weeks. Jenna Ellis, a pro-Trump lawyer who amplified Donald Trump's baseless claims of election fraud as part of what she called a legal elite strike force team, pled guilty today as part of a deal with prosecutors in Georgia. During a public hearing, Ellis pled guilty to a charge of aiding and abetting false statements and writings. She is the 4th defendant to plead guilty in the Georgia case, which charged Trump and 18 others under RICO statute, the Georgia RICO statute, with conspiring to overturn the 2020 presidential election in Trump's favor. And the United Auto Workers expanded its strike against Detroit's Big Three for the 2nd consecutive day as members at a major GM manufacturing plant walked off the job. The union said 5,000 employees from the Arlington assembly plant in Texas are now on strike. And in the much anticipated showdown, Michael Cohen, once Donald Trump's lawyer and fixer, has become his nemesis. And after taking the witness stand today, he cast the former president as a criminal and a cheat. Now, Trump is on trial in the civil fraud case in Manhattan. Trump was just seated a couple of feet away from Michael Cohen. He stared blankly at times, and at other times he scoffed at the testimony, shaking his head in anger before going outside to talk to reporters to call Michael Cohen a convicted felon, a liar, and a loser. This is Areva Martin in Real Time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of Areva Martin in Real Time, and this is the hour where we go deep, where we dig behind the headlines, and we bring you those stories that people are talking about, stories that impact the lives of everyday people. And today we are talking about environmental justice. Many of you, I hope all of you, have heard about some of the atrocious environmental justice issues that impact Black communities, as well as be aware of the thousands and hundreds of thousands of advocates all over the country who have been fighting to clean up areas in Black communities that are, quite frankly, hazardous to the health of all of us. Louisiana in particular, there is this 85-mile stretch of the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, which has been labeled as Cancer Alley. And it's gotten that label because of the number of Black people that live in this community that have developed cancer. Some say it's the air that the residents of this community are breathing, that it's toxic, and that chemicals in the air are causing people to develop very, very serious cancerous conditions. Now, the EPA, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, indicated that fighting environmental justice issues and targeting those companies, those large companies that are the perpetrators of poisonous air and poisonous water, that was going to be the focus of the Biden administration and its EPA. So advocates in Louisiana got very excited when the EPA opened a civil rights investigation into Cancer Alley. Advocates thought finally they were being listened to, and finally something would be done to protect individuals living in this 85-mile stretch. Now, after all of that excitement, something happened pretty abruptly. The EPA dropped its investigation. This came on the heels of the former Republican Attorney General for the state of Louisiana actually filing a lawsuit against the EPA. And some members of the Biden administration said that dropping its investigation into Louisiana and to Cancer Alley is going to help preserve the status of laws that have allowed the Justice Department to investigate and to really address some of these horrific environmental justice issues around the country. And this is kind of a complicated issue, has to do with the makeup of the Supreme Court, the conservative nature of the Supreme Court, and concern that if cases go up before that Supreme Court, that it might rule or make rulings that would hamper and in some ways hinder the efforts of the Attorney General. In this hour, we're going to talk to some advocates who aren't in agreement with the Biden administration's strategy, aren't happy at all about closing the investigation into Cancer Alley, and who are looking at alternative ways to make Louisiana safe and to protect the health and wellness of Black folks that live in that state. When we come forward, we're going to talk to some of those experts and advocates about what they are doing in light of the EPA's dropping its civil rights investigation into Cancer Alley. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union, weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580, weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Time, that's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you. This daily political affairs show will feature notable journalists, industry leaders, lawmakers, change makers, tastemakers, and ordinary people motivated to do their part to reach beyond today's divisions, to make sense out of news of the day, and offer us all a chance to build a more perfect union. Come on and join me.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about.
Joe Biden entered office, he promised to ensure environmental justice for communities of color that have been disproportionately harmed by pollution. The head of Biden's Environmental Protection Agency, Michael Regan, is the first Black man to lead the agency. And he told media outlets in 2021 that he sees this as a priority. And the top of Regan's list was this infamous 85-mile-long chemical corridor in Louisiana, nicknamed Cancer Alley. Last year, the EPA launched a high-profile investigation into whether the state discriminated against Black communities there. And according to the EPA's preliminary findings, there was indeed discrimination against Black folks in this corridor. So the question is, if there was a preliminary finding of racial discrimination, why did the EPA drop its investigation into Cancer Alley? Joining me to discuss is Jo Banner. She is the executive director of the Descent Project, and she is a resident of Cancer Alley. Thank you so much, Jo, for joining me in this hour and talking about this really, really important topic. Tell us, I'm sorry, she's the executive director of Descendants Project. Tell us what it is like to live in this corridor that's called Cancer Alley.
Thank you for having me to explain what we're facing in Cancer Alley and what I feel living there. One part of me is very happy there. This is the area my family has been in for over 300 years. I'm 10th generation Louisianian. I'm deeply rooted to the area. Everywhere I go, I can see traces of my history. I feel a really deep connection and spirituality just being on the land. So it's something that's very important and dear to my heart. But at the same time, we also feel the fear and anxiety of being in the air, being in an area that the air is so polluted, the water, the land, because of just the density of petrochemical plants and other polluters in the air, or in the area, such as grain elevators, aluminum factories, steel companies. It's a lot of pollution that happens there. So the love that we have is also coupled with just a deep anxiety and fear of getting sick. And many of us are sick. Many of us are struggling with disease such as cancer, asthma, or other issues. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I read that originally this area was called Plantation Country because it's located in the southern state. We talked about Louisiana along the lower Mississippi River, and this is where enslaved Africans were forced to work. It now serves as an industrial hub. Over 150 oil refineries, plastics plants, and chemical facilities in this area, and it's causing, as you said, the community to suffer from cancer, respiratory diseases, and other health problems. How did you get involved in advocating for the cleanup of this corridor?
I think in one way we've always been involved with this. I have experienced multiple incidences at the plants that surround us, from plant explosions to leaks along barges in the river, to just smelling the chemicals, hearing flares. So that's that one part that was really always there for us. We fought for most of the plant in the 1990s when I was 10 years old. So even at that point, I remember almost being moved from my house because this plant was coming in. What really I think just highlighted why we needed to make our fight even more noticeable and stronger was potential location of a grain terminal within our community, within my hometown of Wallace. So hearing about this project that was going to bring even more pollution to the cumulative pollution we already have, and also come with a tremendous risk of explosion and just really erasing our history, erasing the lands that were the burial grounds of the enslaved, because they were former plantation lands. So for having that fight, seeing that project come, just made us really have to double down and fight even more to protect our community. And that's when we became more engaged. That's when we started litigation. Is when we really started to reach out to the media. The media reached out to us in many cases, and we became just more, just staying in that advocacy role and having more reach, I guess you can say, through that fight.
And so we're talking, Jo, about polluted water and air, right? So it's the air that you're breathing, and the water that you drink in this community that has been really poisoned by this, these petrochemical plants. How did it make you feel, knowing what you have experienced, knowing what your ancestors have experienced, when you heard that Michael Regan, first Black man ever, was appointed to the EPA, that the issue of environmental justice was priority one for the Biden administration, and then that there was going to be a civil rights investigation into the state of Louisiana as it relates to Cancer Alley? What was your response when you learned about the investigation?
I would also like to add that our land is also polluted. So it's air, water, inland, it's all of it.
Right.
Hearing about the visit from Secretary Regan was part of our fight, is wondering if anyone can see or hear us. Are we being seen? So having his visit come to our area was big because it meant that somebody was seeing us. It meant that we have the attention of a high-ranking official when on so many levels we have been ignored by our local government. I have yet to be on the council, my parish council agenda in St. John the Baptist Parish to fight heavy industry such as the grain elevator. So having somebody come in like this official as Michael Regan and really putting just his attention to it, and knowing that the Biden administration is seeing us or was seeing us and taking the time to come to do more than just tour, to actually sit down and hear about our experiences was, it was really motivational, enlightening. We know that we're going to fight, but we hope that someone else could really just help us carry the load for once, that we wouldn't be here all on our own having to fight with not anybody giving us assistance. And we felt that Michael Regan would be the person who could help carry the yoke, as we say sometimes.
And so were you involved when the actual civil rights investigation was open? Were you interviewed? Were people in your organization, were they interviewed? Tell us about the investigation that was opened by Regan's office.
We were part of that investigation from the beginning. We were party to it. So we were involved in all the conversations and the meetings and expressing our concerns and what areas that we would like investigated. Although I want to remind you, and you probably don't need to be reminded, but the EPA also came up with their own concerns. So it wasn't just us telling them, come and see this, they could see it for themselves, such as the case with Dinka, a plant in St. John Parish, where the EPA saw the pollution and was alarmed by that. They came to the community and said, this plant is really dangerous. So yeah, in many cases, the EPA knew exactly what we were talking about. We were just many conversations and I guess game planning amongst ourselves as these clients or as parties to it, just trying to make sure we got all the information out there to the EPA that we thought was relevant.
And at some point, the EPA did come back and say its preliminary findings was that there was discrimination against Black people. Is that accurate? Was that one of the findings from the investigation?
Correct. That was one of the findings.
So how did you learn that the EPA was closing its investigation?
We were informed probably the day that it hit. Our attorneys informed us, and then by the next day, the media already knew when that announcement came out. So we then knew that all of this was for nothing. I will say that we noticed the momentum slow down from the EPA. We thought there was a lot more engagement and a lot more efforts to research, and really hoping for a visit to come to the area and see for themselves, because that's what you should do in any fact finding and case finding. You should come and see for yourselves. And it didn't take much investigation. You could literally just stand by our houses and you could see the pollution. You could see everything we were talking about. So we were hoping to get those boots on the ground and that capacity, not just a visit from Administrator Regan, but really having this in a investigative type of capacity. That never happened, at least that we knew of.
So the way this is reported in the news is that the investigation is open, there are preliminary findings, and then your then Attorney General, Republican Attorney General, who's now your governor, Jeff Landry, sues the EPA, and the EPA then drops this investigation. Is that timing accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. That sums it up.
And based on your knowledge, you don't have to give me the legalese of it, but what was the basis of Jeff Landry's, the Attorney General of Louisiana at the time? What was the basis of his lawsuit against the EPA?
I think if I recall, the basis was the EPA overextending itself into Louisiana's business. So it was the EPA was just having more authority over Louisiana, and that it was, just essentially stepping in and interfering.
So saying that that didn't have jurisdiction.
Exactly. Didn't have jurisdiction.
Whatever was happening in this cancer alley was under the purview of the state government, and that the EPA did not have the jurisdiction or authority to come in and regulate how Louisiana conducted its business in this community. That's kind of paraphrasing what the lawsuit claimed. Now, again, what was reported out is that the EPA agreed to drop the investigation, thinking, I guess, that Landry would drop the lawsuit. But my understanding is that the lawsuit against the EPA is ongoing. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, it still has not been dropped. So I don't know where it stands. It could be all for naught. And once again, whether it's dropped or not, we're still a sacrifice zone. We're still the exploited people, just who have been exploited, much like our ancestors were exploited. And by the plantation system, by the county, by corporations, here we go again, being sacrificed.
Did the EPA, Joe, come, send a letter, send a representative? Did they get on the phone and call you guys and say, look, for strategic reasons, for precedent-setting reasons or whatever, we feel it's best at this time to drop the investigation?
We had a follow-up conversation at the request of our attorneys to have that, but that was really by request. As far as some people, some of the signees in the litigation, they did get, from what I understand, some communication between the EPA office and for them. We did not get that. We didn't get that phone call or that email saying, we're sorry, this is what we want to do for you.
Do you have any understanding as you sit here today as to why they dropped the investigation? Like, what's your understanding other than what you perhaps have read in the paper, like what I've read in the paper?
I feel like, honestly, the Biden administration has just lost a lot of. I remember when President Biden was running and he mentioned Cancer Alley. He mentioned that as part of when he was campaigning. We have not heard that conversation. We haven't heard Cancer Alley uttered by him. And so I feel that now the pressure of, or what made him run, or the acknowledgement of Cancer Alley, it's not, we're not hearing that anymore. We're not hearing environmental justice concerns. We're not hearing the same conversations we were having. There's more issues we're facing with our environment, and the administration has been very silent. It's not just about giving EJ Farty money, or you still have to resolve the problem. It can't just be throwing money in the way that you're doing it while allowing pollution to still happen and while allowing it to still be polluted. We won't be able.
So you don't have an explanation. You don't have a official explanation from the EPA as to why they dropped the investigation.
No. I think in some cases they were saying that certain lawsuits, such as in Dinka, was being essentially handled by the DOJ because of that lawsuit. But we don't currently have a lawsuit, so it wouldn't be relevant to us. And I think the same with.
Are you involved yourself, your organization, the Descendants Project? Are you guys in a Title VII lawsuit against the state of Louisiana?
Title VII or Title VI?
Well, did you have a lawsuit against the state of Louisiana?
We had it would have been through that, to Title VI.
Okay. And did that lawsuit die with the closing of the investigation?
Well, yeah. Our lawsuit, I guess it's not really a lawsuit. Let me take that back. The action was for the EPA to, with the air permitting and certain air permits. So
like that more of an administrative claim than an actual lawsuit. Okay. Right, exactly. So where are you guys now? Well, it's closed. The investigation's closed. It's something to do with DOJ and lawsuits. But like, where's your organization? Because you guys are still living there. It's still an issue for you. So what are you all doing now to try to ameliorate some of the harm caused by your land, water, and air?
We're using other policies, other federal laws that can help, being more strategic, using more strategy, understanding that this route may not be the route for us right now, but thankfully, we've always kind of watched what's been going around us and having more than one way to address this. Of course, we would have loved to have it addressed through this. Would have meant a lot less work for us and a lot more time devoting to bettering our community through other means. But being that we don't have that, we all just have to dig in. We're all digging in. We're all having more conversations with attorneys and doing more research and coming up with a strategy now that this is no longer a tool that we can utilize.
Well, I just want to say to you, congratulations. I'm an advocate, and I have so much respect for the work that you are doing. And it's because of advocates like you, people who live in communities, people who are impacted, whether it's by pollution or gun violence, unsafe automobiles. It's the advocacy of everyday people that changes laws in these countries, or in this country, and that changes the way big business does its business. And I know, that dropping or closing of that investigation felt like a blow to your efforts. But I know that you all are determined, and I just see this as a delay, not a denial. So I just want to encourage you to keep moving forward, keep doing what you're doing. We see you, we appreciate you. Your efforts will be rewarded. And the lives that you will save and are saving are, it's immeasurable, the work that you're doing. And I can't thank you enough for, standing up and having the courage to do this and taking the time out of your own personal life to do this. And we'll continue to follow this story, and anything that we can do to help push this issue forward, you can count on us at KBLA to do that. Again, thank you so much. When we come forward, we're going to talk to another advocate that's working to fight pollution in land, water, and air all across this country. This is a huge issue. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Follow the leader.
Following the leader.
Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, ma.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Are you interested in catching up on all the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews? I got you. Tune in to the Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on the Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Cortez, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union, weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580, weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Time, that's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered to be a part of the solution to issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, A More Perfect Union was designed for you. This daily political affairs show will feature notable.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach.
We are back, and in this hour, we're talking about environmental issues, environmental justice issues, and we just talked about Cancer Alley in Louisiana with Jo Banner. She is a resident of Cancer Alley and an advocate that has been fighting, trying to get both the local and federal environmental protection agencies to acknowledge the harmful pollution to the land, water, and air in her community. Jane Williams is joining me now. She's Executive Director of California Communities Against Toxics. Jane is one of the country's leading experts on clean air regulations and other policy regulations related to toxic chemicals. Thank you so much for joining us, Jane. I just wonder, do you have any insights on what the official word is from the Biden administration on why they dropped that investigation into Cancer Alley? I have had a chance to meet, the EPA director, Michael Regan. I completely believe Joe Biden when he says that addressing environmental justice issues are a priority and addressing some of the historic harms that have been done to Black communities because of big companies polluting the water, land, and air in those communities. So I know this isn't something nefarious. I know this isn't Joe Biden going back on a campaign promise. I know that he cares deeply about communities of color. So maybe you can help us understand what happened in that case in particular.
Well, I would say you must be a very optimistic person.
I am.
This issue of environmental justice has been an issue as long as this country has existed. So let's put it in the historical context of that, right? Where people's lands have been appropriated and taken from them. And, whether you're talking about, your game being stolen on your Aboriginal lands by poachers, or you're talking about what's happening in Cancer Alley, where your land is essentially being taken by large petrochemical companies. It's very similar. So the Biden administration had an opportunity to take a very big step forward with that Dinka complaint. And it had an opportunity to make a very affirmative statement about whose side they were on. And, they put out the letter, which I feel quite sure that you've seen, that basically said the state of Louisiana is permitting these facilities. They're concentrating them in primarily these African-American parishes. They're not doing a good job of enforcing environmental regulations and standards, and that this is a very alarming pattern in practice. The Attorney General for the state of Louisiana insisted on signing any documents that the state of Louisiana would be part of, and they basically were represented by lawyers that represent the same industries that the complaints were about. And I myself am, and I'm not making a statement that should surprise anybody. I'm very disappointed that they did not do what they should have done in Louisiana. And just to put things, now to go back in time, I was actually part of one of the very first Title VI complaints that was ever filed in the country back in the mid-90s. So I have a lot of understanding of this issue and a deep appreciation for how difficult it is for any administration, especially when you're looking at that time, Louisiana had a Democratic governor, right? So you're basically telling that Democratic governor that, hey, your agency is not doing what it should be doing. But I just, I come from a small town where in the mid-'80s, in a town of a few thousand people, 11 children contracted cancer and all but one died in 3 years. So I come at this from a very passionate angle, very similar to Joe. I go to the grocery store and I see the grandparents of those children that died. So we know this is happening all across America. We know more now than we did when I started my career 3 decades ago about the horrible impacts that pollution have in these highly impacted communities. And we know that if you're a person of color, your chance of, dying early, having a child that dies early, having asthma, getting cancer, having, significant impacts, your ability to reproduce. We know so much more now than we have ever known. And so you do have to say to yourself, well, if we know what these impacts are and we know what's causing it, then why can't we do more as a society? And, in 2016, we knew that Dinka was one of the highest risk facilities in the United States. We also know that for methylene oxide emissions, there's other really, really high-risk facilities in Cancer Alley that are emitting chloroprene, 1,3-butadiene, ethylene oxide. We've done fence line monitoring as part of the hazardous organic NESHAP rule. So we see it, we know it, just like Joe knows it, your previous speaker. And so I guess if we're not going to do this, if this administration is not going to respond through the Title VI complaint process, then what is their venue to respond to this? Because this is an historic injustice that has been occurring for decades and is going to continue to occur for decades. And so where do we end cycle on this? What is the mechanism by which we say, no, we're not poaching your game anymore, right? We're not poisoning your people anymore.
So James, that's really the question. Joe said she never saw an official response from the EPA. Have you seen or have you been privy to what the EPA's response is as to why they dropped the investigation? She said she heard that it had something to do with referring this matter over to the Department of Justice. So do you have any clear information about the EPA's explanation?
EPA currently has an enforcement action that it started before it dropped this case. And that enforcement action basically says, there's problems here. EPA sent their inspectors in, and the inspectors had to come out because the chloroprene emissions were so high, because Dinka was essentially disposing of their chloroprene in their brine ponds, all right? So EPA has issued orders and is in litigation with Dinka, and that litigation is going to come is going to be argued in the federal courts in the spring of next year. So EPA, if you ask Mr. Regan, he would say most likely they did not see a path forward with this Title VI complaint that was actually going to get the reductions that they felt like they needed, and that they're going to rely upon a two-pronged approach. One is important, the existing enforcement action, and the other is the rulemaking process, which we are now in, the hazardous organic NESHAP, called the
so to be fair to the EPA, it's not as if they dropped this issue altogether. They're saying we're going to rely on two other mechanisms to try to address it. And I can see, obviously, as an advocate, you don't believe that that's, perhaps the most efficient way to do it. And I just want to let the audience know that.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say.
Hold on, I want to tell people what
being involved in all three of these processes, I would say that they still have the opportunity to take very aggressive action by putting out a strong hazardous organic NESHAP rule and taking aggressive enforcement action and ending these emissions of chloroprene into the parish.
Okay. So DINCA, I just want people to know, is a company operating in the former DuPont facility in LaPlace, Louisiana. And it produces the chemical chloroprene, which is used in the manufacture of neoprene synthetic rubber. And we know neoprene is used in a wide variety of products, such as wetsuits and waterproof gloves, laptop sleeves, electric insulation, and automobile fan belts and hoses. So this is a company that's producing a product that, its final product are things that we use in our everyday lives. And this company in this production is making a very dangerous chemical. So I just want people to understand, because you use DINCA, and Joe referenced it as well, and everybody is not necessarily familiar with who and what DINCA is. I want to talk with you about some of the other areas like Cancer Alley, because obviously that's not isolated. What are some of the other hot spots in the country that have these high levels of concentration of these chemical companies that are polluting the air, land, and water, and disproportionately impacting Black communities?
Right. Well, the Houston Chip Channel is another, very large geographic area that has a lot of this, and then increasingly, and the Ohio Valley, right? The Ohio River Valley in Pennsylvania and Ohio and down into West Virginia, the Kanawha Valley, where you've got basically these, what I would call chemical manufacturing hotspots, right? And so you've got Louisiana, Texas, West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania that are states that have a majority of the large chemical and plastic producing facilities in the country.
And when we come forward, I want to talk about, how you rate Regan, Secretary Regan, first Black man to head the EPA. How is he doing overall with respect to some of these hotspots that you've just identified? And how does Biden's administration on some of these environmental justice issues fare compared to former administrations, including Trump and Obama and others? Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook.
We are back, and in this hour, we're talking about environmental justice. Jane Williams, Executive Director of California Communities Against Toxics, she's one of the nation's leading experts on clean air regulations, is joining me in this hour. We've been talking some about Cancer Alley in Louisiana and this company called DINCA that is operating in the former DuPont facility in Laplace, Louisiana. And Dinka produces a chemical called chloroprene. And the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, reclassified chloroprene as a likely carcinogen in 2010. So since 2010, the EPA has known that this chemical produced by this company could be, cause cancer, that it is a toxin that is related to or can be directly related to causing cancer in the individuals that live in that area. And Joe told us that many people in Cancer Alley have been impacted. They've developed asthma and cancer and other respiratory issues. And Jane, you were just telling us about some other really toxic parts of this country. So Reagan, first secretary appointed to the EPA, first African-American, says that environmental justice is a priority for him and the administration. How would you rate this administration, not in absolute terms, but in relative terms to predecessor administrations on these issues?
Well, I would say that I am one of the people in the country uniquely qualified to answer that question, because I've worked with every administration since Clinton.
All right, well, I asked the right person.
And we fought hard to get Mr. Reagan as our EPA administrator, okay? I don't know if you know this or not, but activists in California opposed the appointment of Mary Nichols, who was the head of the California Air Resources Board. We came out and publicly opposed her appointment, and she was the person that Biden had picked to be appointed. So when we opposed her appointment, then they picked Mr. Reagan. And so do I believe that deep in my heart that Mr. Reagan has an absolute commitment to this issue? I do. I have seen it. You know, I know that Mr. Reagan is personally motivated by the events in his own family to take action and understands the horrific forces that are in play in this country when it comes to the impacts of pollution, especially on children's health. Do I also know more than most, better than most, the incredible bureaucratic inertia that is in existence and that you have to overcome in order to get real action on environmental justice? Yes. And do I also know that there is a fundamental difference between getting money to flow into highly impacted communities and getting the law to flow and justice to flow into highly impacted communities? Yes, I do. And so I often say, you know, Justice 40 is an absolutely amazing program that this administration is rolling out. The investments from the IRA and Build Back Better into building new infrastructure, that's electrification, that's using renewable energy, and that's like making a difference in the lives of people in how their house is operating and what kind of car they're driving. These are fundamental, life-changing, altering decisions that were made by the Biden-Harris administration on how our children will be growing up, what kinds of technologies they'll be using.
Let me stop you for a second, Jane, and again, give a definition for folks who are listening and watching. You use the term Justice 40, and Justice 40 is an initiative. And according to the White House website, for the first time in our nation's history, the federal government has made it a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution. And they're calling this a historic commitment. This became the law, the land, by executive order signed within days of Joe Biden taking office. So when Jane talks about Justice 40, she's talking about the money that will flow into certain communities as a result of this executive action by Joe Biden.
Exactly. And for your listeners, that's a fantastic initiative. Many of my colleagues that are on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Committee were instrumental in crafting this. But there is no one that has done this work as long as I have, or even half as long as I have, that will not say to you that the exercise of the law is equally as important as the flow of the dollars. And, when I often think about Ruby Bridges, right? It wasn't money that got Ruby Bridges to that school. It was the exercise of the law. And it was the exercise of laws by a federal administration that overcame Governor Wallace and his vow, right, that these schools would remain segregated. And I would just point out to everyone, right, how important that the arbiters of the law and what the law is and the instruments of the law and how we use those to protect those who are most vulnerable, those in the end are really the masters of what our civilization and our society is about. And I look forward.
Go ahead. So you're applauding Biden for Justice 40, but are you saying that you want to see a stronger commitment from the administration in terms of enforcing laws that would regulate and in some ways prohibit and reduce this pollution that we're seeing in places like Kansas, in Louisiana and Houston?
Right, and this administration has a rule in motion, the hazardous organic niche rule, that will put significant limitations on the ability of the chemical manufacturing and petrochemical infrastructure in this country to emit these very powerful carcinogens, not just chloroquine, but ethylene oxide, 1,3-butadiene, benzene, other powerful carcinogens into low-income communities of color across this country. So what I'm saying to you is, the proof is in the pudding, right? Well, Ruby Bridges get to school, and that's not about money flowing into a census tract, right? That's about the exercise of the law. And this administration still has a fantastic opportunity. It has two fantastic opportunities in front of us, both with the enforcement action against Dinka, which is focused on Dinka. But the hazardous organic niche is focused on hundreds of facilities in those states, in those hotspot areas. So, really,
when is this rule that you're talking about? When does it become effective?
Actually, the rule is scheduled to be finalized in the spring of next year. So this opportunity is right in front of them right now, where they can take real action across the entire petrochemical infrastructure to make massive reductions in a law that helps protect people that are in the most vulnerable communities, like the Houston Ship Channel and like the Ohio River Valley and Cancer Alley. And so when you say to me, well, what will Mr. Rubin's legacy be? That's what it will be, right? It will be, did you use the power of the law to actually protect these communities?
And what's the name of this rule again, Jane?
It's called the Hazardous Organic Niche, better known as the HON.
The HON, okay. Okay.
Yes, and there's another two called Group 1 and 2 polymers and resins. So this suite of rules will govern the behavior of over 230 large chemical manufacturing facilities, including Dinka, and will basically tell these facilities, you have got to have massive reductions. You cannot just vent all these super toxic compounds into these low-income communities of color. And so it is really about making the promise of environmental justice real.
And is this a historic rule? Have we seen anything like this before under any other administration?
Actually, no, we have not. If they put out the rule as proposed, it will be one of the strongest NESHAP rules ever issued by any administration.
Mm. So obviously, Joe Biden gets a lot of credit from the climate community for both of these things, this very aggressive rulemaking, as well as the substantial dollars that Justice 40 will cause to pour into communities. Why do you think more people don't know that? Because you and I are having this conversation. I had to do some research before this interview. But for those folks, who are at home and may live in one of these areas that we're talking about, or area that's very similar, I don't think they know that help is underway by way of Justice 40 and by way of the HON, as you call it. how do we get the word out? Because I just don't sense that people have a sense that this is an administration that has done something or is doing something that is historic as it relates to environmental justice issues.
Well, I certainly want to give kudos to you for inviting Ms. Banner and I on your show to talk about it, because I don't spend a lot of time on talk shows. I do spend a lot of time with investigative reporters, and I do think that journalism and journalists, they suffer sometimes from there's a shiny object. Let's talk about this other thing, or conversely, let's talk about this really bad thing that's happening, right? So I want to applaud you, and I hope that you start spreading the word to other journalists. Like, this administration has been the most aggressive administration on environmental justice in the history of the country. And they have set out policies and processes. As you know, the IRA is evergreen. Billions and billions and billions of dollars for years and years and years will flow into these communities. And it will make a huge difference in the lives of the next generation and this generation.
When will we start to see the impact of that money? We're running out of time, Jane, but you said something really important, because oftentimes money is appropriated in Washington and people say, well, I didn't see the money.
Right.
When will they see it, feel it in their communities?
Well, you know what? There was just a report released yesterday about the hundreds of thousands of people that are now working in the renewable energy industry since the IRA and Build Back Better were passed. So I do think that we're starting to see some of that already on the ground. But certainly by next year, you will see a much bigger impact than you do now.
Well, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Jane, for your expertise. Thank you for your advocacy, and thank you for sharing your brilliance on these issues, such important issues. Because if you are African American, you probably know someone that has been impacted by some of these environmental justice issues. You know someone who's currently living in one of these toxic communities. And this is an issue that we all, as a country, not just Black folks, but everyone in this country should be concerned about. So we need voices like yours, putting that pressure on the White House, on the administration, in terms of who should be seated in that chair as our EPA director, and how those dollars should flow into communities. So again, thank you for all the work that you do. We are out of time. The next voice that you hear will be Robin Ayers and the Raw Report right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Don't touch that dial.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Cortez, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union, weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580, weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Time, that's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. As KBLA Talk 1580's chief national political analyst, every day you can expect your daily dose of political news of consequence. If you're looking to be engaged